It's like a cockroach, it can survive a nuclear blast. It's just amazingly tough.
The MiG-23 is a staple among third-generation jet fighters, both in real life and in War Thunder. We currently have 8 floggers in the game, 2 MiG-23Ms, 3 MiG-23MLs, a MiG-23B, and 2 MiG-27s. Let's start with some general characteristics. The iconic variable sweep design leads to good performance at high speeds with the wings back, as well as good turning ability and energy retention with the wings out. If you're going into a fight, it's important to remember to get your wings out as far as possible before the first turn, as with the wings back, the MiG-23 pulls AOA but doesn't actually turn well and bleeds a lot of speed in the process. The Sapphire 23 radar is probably the quirkiest radar in War Thunder. First of all, it operates on J-band, which is rare for radars, and that means if an enemy's RWR cannot detect J-band, his RWR simply won't go off if you lock him. That's a big deal because it allows you to stealth attack certain planes with R24Rs. Another weird thing is the modes. The standard SRC mode works like any other radar, but the alternative mode that's available changes based on altitude. You get MTI below 1800 meters above ground level, and SRC-LD above 1800 meters above ground level. For the purposes of War Thunder, MTI works almost the same as Pulse Doppler, it just eats chaff a little more in my experience. The radar's main use is guiding the R23R and R24R, so if you're rocking infrared missiles, use the IRST instead. IRST doesn't help your missiles lock from greater range, but it can help you pre-lead the target and wait for lock without setting off the target's RWR even if they can detect J-band. Do note that the R13M1 cannot slave to radar or IRST. Alright, let's start with MiG-23M, which sits at 11.0. For your weapons on the inboard pylons, you can choose between 2 R13M1s or 4 R60Ms, and for your outboard pylons, a pair of R13M1s, a pair of R60Ms, or a pair of R23s. I made a video about Soviet missiles if you want more detail, but the short version is that I recommend 4 R60Ms and 2 R23Ts. It's got the tried and tested Gish-23L with 200 rounds. This is very common for Soviet aircraft. The gun hits very hard but has poor ballistics and low trigger time, so it's not the easiest gun to use. The Sapphire 23D radar is pretty bad on account of not having narrowscan or ACM mode, making getting locks very difficult, which is part of the reason why I advise against taking the R23R. The IRST also lacks an ACM mode, but it does at least have narrowscan, which is a plus. Defensively, the MiG-23M kinda falls short. The RWR is the very dated 4-directional SPO-10 and the jet only has 12 countermeasures. Granted, they are large caliber and they single drop unlike the J-35XS or Su-22M3, but 12 flares does not take you very far and once you run out, you're screwed. Flight performance wise, the MiG-23M is pretty solid, nothing really to write home about, both good or bad. Overall, if this plane existed in a vacuum, it would be fine. Unfortunately, up tiers to 12.0 are rough, and the 11.3 MiG-23s are just so much better, it's hard to recommend the MiG-23M. How much you enjoy it is probably going to depend on how many down tiers to 10.0 you're getting. MiG-23MF was the top reward for the 2021 Winter Crafting event and is straight copy-paste of the MiG-23M but sits in the German tree. It's completely identical to the MiG-23M in terms of weapons, sensors, the low flare count, RWR, flight performance, all of it. It's currently selling for about 60 gaijin on the market. It's not a premium, it's not unique. If you want to grind Germany, buy a premium, and if you want to play a MiG-23M, play the free one in the Soviet tree. Don't buy the MiG-23MF. Next up is the MiG-23ML series at 11.3. This includes the ML, MLA, and MLD. All three of these are very similar jets. We're going to start with the ML. The MiG-23ML is the main rank 7 premium for the Soviet tree, and it'll set you back $70. It's got upgrades across the board compared to MiG-23M. First of all, for weapons, the inboard pylons are the same, but you now get access to the much improved R24 instead of the R23 for your outboard pylons. The R24T is fantastic, great for long-range sneak attacks that can catch players off guard, but the R24R is seriously improved over the R23R and continues to be one of my favorite missiles in the game, so you can't go wrong no matter which R24 you take. The cannon is the same, but the new Sapphire 23ML radar now has an ACM mode, which makes the R24R so much more usable. I like to stay low, look for targets of opportunity at 5 to 10 kilometers, quickly lock them with ACM MTI, and fire an R24R at them. Usually there's nothing they can do to react in time. The ML gets some pretty serious defensive upgrades too. The addition of 2 countermeasure rails above the jet brings the total countermeasure count to 72 large caliber, and the RWR is improved to the SPO-15, which provides more info about threats in the area. Although do note that it cannot detect J-band, so that actually means you cannot detect other MiG-23s. Flight performance is considerably improved thanks to the new R35 engine, which puts out a lot more thrust, on top of the airframe being lightened by a few hundred kilos. The result is better flight performance across the board, especially noticeable in acceleration and speed, where the ML will now blow through its 1470 kph rip speed at sea level if you aren't paying attention. It also hits its Mach 2.4 rip speed at high altitude, making it to my knowledge the absolute fastest plane in War Thunder, although that's not something you'll ever use in a match. The ML is a great plane across the board, and it's in a great tech tree, so it's easy to recommend as one of the best Rank 7 premiums you can get. $70 is a lot to ask though, so I recommend waiting for a sale to see if it gets discounted. There should be one coming up in less than a month and another one in late December. MiG-23MLA sits in the German tree and is very similar to the ML with a few slight tweaks. First of all, it gains the ability to mix R24 types, so if you want to take an R24R and an R24T, you now can, which is something no flogger up to this point has been able to do, and isn't a bad idea in my opinion. On top of that, the MLA airframe is lightened by an additional 150 kilograms over the ML, but everything else is the same. The radar has been renamed to Sapphire 23MLA, but it's identical in performance to the Sapphire 23ML. Those are the only differences I could think of. This is another really great plane for the same reasons as the ML, and if you're grinding Germany, I do recommend considering playing it. And at last we have the MLD. Like the MLD can mix its R24s if you want. The radar is renamed again to Sapphire 23MLA2, although once again it's just a rename and all three Sapphire 23ML radars are completely identical in functionality. The MLD does not have the extra 150 kilogram weight reduction like the MLA has. Instead, it has notched wing roots and slats that deploy automatically in flight. This gives it better AOA and initial pull than the MLA at the expense of energy retention, so many people consider the MLA and MLD to be side grades of each other. The MLD is my favorite flogger, and I still enjoy playing it from time to time even in the MiG-29 era. So quick recap, all of the MLs gain a better engine, a better radar, more flares, and R24s. The MLA and MLD gain the ability to mix their R24 types, the MLA weighs 150 kilograms less, and the MLD is a little more agile, but all three of these are similar enough that if you've played one, you're not missing out by skipping the other ones. Next we move into the ground strike variants, starting with MiG-23BN. This jet sits at the very low battle rating of 9.7, the fact that there's even a MiG-23 that fights 8.7 is nuts. But it's very bare bones. It has no missiles whatsoever, leaving it with just the gun. It's got no flares whatsoever, the old RWR, and the flight performance is worse than the MiG-23M, although at 9.7 its flight performance is its biggest asset. The lack of flares and missiles at a BR where you really want both is kind of a deal breaker for this plane. If you've got lots of experience with these kind of planes, then you know what you're getting into and maybe you want to try it, but for the average player this plane is probably not going to be enjoyable in the slightest. The last two planes are the MiG-27s. The MiG-27 is a further development of the MiG-23B series and has now been fully specialized into the air-to-ground role. The air intakes have been simplified for subsonic flight, the nose has been fitted with an electro-optical targeting system for air-to-ground work, and the GISH-23L has been swapped for the 6-barrel 30mm GISH-630 with 500 rounds. The first MiG-27 is MiG-27M at 11.0. For air-to-air missiles, you can take 2 R13M1s or 4 R60Ms, and it does have 72 flares and the SPO-15 like the MiG-23MLs do, which is pretty nice. Unfortunately, flight performance is the worst among floggers, with the MiG-27M being a very heavy boy. There's no reason to use the MiG-27M for CAS if you're a ground player, so the appeal of this jet is taking the 30mm into AirRB and trying to vaporize some planes with it. Unfortunately, the flight performance just isn't good enough to be enjoyable for that in my opinion, and I don't even find the GISH-630 to be that much better for air-to-air than the GISH-23L, since they both hit very hard and have similar trigger time. Because it sits below the MiG-27K in battle rating and has cheaper modification costs, this is the MiG-27 to take into AirRB, but due to the airframe, I'm not so sure that's something you'd want to do unless maybe you just want to try it for the sake of trying something different to goof around in. The last flogger is the MiG-27K at 11.3, pretty much the same deal as MiG-27M in terms of air-to-air and flight performance, except the MiG-27K has some upgrades for air-to-ground, namely a much better nose camera. I don't play ground, so I'm not qualified to speak from experience, but from what I've been told by friends that do, the MiG-27K is better in contested airspace and the Su-25T and Su-39 are better in uncontested airspace. This plane is probably a horrible experience to grind in air, but you can get your KH-25s as your second modification, so you can be on your way to destroying some tanks. That's it for the MiG-23 family. They're cool planes, and as an R24R enjoyer, I love flying the MLD and slinging R24Rs at helpless F4S players. I've got several videos in the works, so subscribe so you don't miss those, come hang out on Discord, and thanks for watching.